Welcome to an episode of Prepper Talk Radio, radio for the ready-minded, where we focus on God, family, and country. You've got your hosts, Scott, Shane, and me, Paris, in the house, ready to coming at you live. If you're listening, you're not live, but you're alive. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Facebook. If you're on YouTube right now, hit that like button so the algorithm knows that there's people watching and that they're liking what they're hearing, so that we get the word out. More people, more eyeballs on the content. Wanted to just today we're going to talk about how to get prepared for a drought. One of the best ways to get prepared for a drought is to go to preppertalkradio.com and download all of our resources. The next best way to prepare for a drought is to go to mylibertybox.com/preppertalk and start spending your money with American companies, American made, American owned, American products, American jobs, and stop giving your money to woke agenda companies that don't care about you and basically are not to have your best interests in mind. The third best way to prepare for a drought, we're going to talk about all the rest of the ways to prepare for a drought after this. So thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And we're going to jump right in.
Nice segue, Paris.
You like that?
I like how the advertising portion became part of the pitch of getting better prepared for a drought. It works, right? The key, the thing is like when it comes to the world of preparedness, like we talked about this in our last episode, like finding groups, right? One of the things that's funny to me is like there are people right now who are like throttle at 100% trying to get prepared, like for one specific event coming up, and you probably have seen it all over social media. If you spend too much time on there, you will. But everyone's talking about, there's going to be an eclipse, and we're going to expect EMPs and social unrest and riots and crazy, and it's reminiscent of Y2K, right? It's reminiscent of every other like flag and fire moment of like, oh, things are going to happen, and that's not why we prepare. We prepare so that our life is less interrupted by any catastrophic event or life event going on around us. And I think I love the topic of today because we've been in a drought off and on for the last 15 years where I live. Like it's almost every other year, there's like a different level of drought issue that we're in. And so this can affect anybody anywhere. Say that again.
I was just on Utah's website, and they said every year we're either in a drought or we're preparing for a drought. So kind of my credo I'd live by is just always be prepared, right? Just for anything. It's always a possibility here where we live. It's always a possibility.
Well, I used to live in Arizona too, where it was also always a possibility. I mean, anyone that lives in a desert climate, you're dealing with at every point in the year, some type of drought issue, right? That's just how it is. Now, if you live elsewhere and you've got humidity and you've got a lot of water resources, like, okay, great, but you could still be hit with a drought. And that's why I think this topic this early in the year is good to remind people of, because you may hit parts of the year where you can't water your lawn. Oh no, right? Or you might be limited to, you can only take one bath a week, or you can't do laundry the way you used to do it, right? So those are the types of things we're going to talk about today. Basic preparedness, putting together a plan, and here is our recommendations of what you should be doing.
Well, we always talk about the survival rules of 3. This hits 2 of them, water and food, because the real thing we'd be saying is how to prepare for famine is really what it comes down to, right? And there are 2 different kinds of famine, if you ask me. There's engineered, man-made, and then there's the other kind of famine that is okay, you need to repent type of famine, right? That's the 2 reasons famines come, or I guess there might be a third, is just government and stupidity, right? That has come into play in the past with other famines.
I think that falls under the repent famine.
Yeah, probably
really
so. Just keep it narrow.
I know when I was in California, one of the things that I did, and this is probably a really good idea anyways, I just personally never really understood what the purpose of grass is. And
Mm-hmm.
I tore up all the grass in my front yard and when I lived in California, and it was kind of cool because my city had a drought lawn yard slash fund. And so I basically spent, I think I had to spend it up front, and I put in like almost 4 grand into my front yard, and making it drought resistant. And
Mm-hmm.
after I submitted all the paperwork, they gave me back 3 grand. So I think ended up spending like $900 and got my whole front yard redone. All the water, like the guy came out, he ran all the water lines and made them all the drip, super, efficient drip lines and front yard stuff. And now when I did it, I just bought whatever plants the guy recommended. But I think now if I was to do that again, and again, grass doesn't make much sense to me. It should be, anyways, I don't even know why we have grass most of the time, but it should be more of an edible garden. Like I would put edibles in my front yard now that are drought,
Are we talking like the gummies or the brownies?
Yes. Well, have a couple have a hedge over there for gummies, and then a hedge over there.
That's for our California, Washington, Colorado listeners. Edibles.
Yeah, we just. In fact, a guy a couple doors down got in trouble last year by the police for growing certain plants that he probably ought not to be growing.
Well, I think it's important that like understanding how water consumption of all the things that you're doing and the things that you're using, like the biggest water waste is your yard grass.
Mm-hmm.
If you're gardening, you'll use about 1/4 of the amount of water than what your grass uses. So planning your landscape around an edible landscape, permaculture things that are going to produce hopefully year after year, that also are local, that can deep root into the ground so they can have water supply further down. Like that's the key. Like that's one of the most like simplest solutions to water usage. But yeah, it's funny because I hate my yard. I hate the grass.
Yeah.
If we had buffalo grass here in Utah, like the natural grass that's supposed to be here, the roots are 6.5 to 8 feet deep.
Wow.
This Kentucky bluegrass is like inches. And so it is not drought resistant. It's a waste of money and water.
And then you get judged by your neighbors if your lawn's not nice and green and manicured and such, right? And hopefully you don't pass the same judgment on to our other neighbors who probably will hopefully believe the same things we do. Like, I'm not wasting my time, my money on that front lawn. It's only for my neighbors, right?
A good solution might be green paint.
They did that in California, right? During one of the last droughts.
They do, yes.
Let the lawns go and then just go paint them green. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I see more and more yards with the artificial turf, around here. So.
Yeah, no, my brother put that in his backyard and it works.
So let's talk about some things we can do besides the yard to help align ourselves with being more resistant or ourselves being drought tolerant, right? Having things set up in place so we don't have to worry about a drought as much. And the number one thing is water storage, right? How many gallons of water do I need on hand for my family for a period of 2 weeks to clean ourselves, to cook, and to do the basic necessities that we need to do? Like, what is your perspective on that, guys?
Well, the first thing I thought of when you said that was 2 weeks. That doesn't seem like it's long enough.
So that I put it at 2 weeks because that's typically the biggest emergency. In what I've read and what I've experienced personally, it's like you can get water trucked in from emergency response typically in about 2 weeks, maybe 3, but minimum you need 2 weeks minimum on hand. And I'm thinking also about like apartment preppers, people who don't have places to put additional stuff. Like I'm trying to think at the most minimum, like I have 6 months of water, but I have property, I have space.
Mm-hmm. I have a buddy that reached out
as an individual. Like, what do you need?
A buddy of mine reached out to me recently. He's like, "Hey, I'm looking to buy in this 250 gallon tank. What do you think?" And I'm like, "Dude, that's the same one I have." So of course I'm going to say, go for it.
But obviously, again, looking toward the survival rules of 3, one thing it doesn't take into account is sanitation. obviously, we say minimum 1 gallon per person per day. And that's really what you need to consume, like 3/4 of a gallon. The rest is going to be for sanitation. So you really need more like 2 or 3 gallons minimum per day. And so, I know that the authorities, and I do air quotes with the authorities, right, do recommend 2 weeks. I have heard a few saying 3 weeks water. Might as well do as much as you can. Like I say, if you can afford 1 tank, great. If not, if you can afford 2, even better. If you can afford 3 or 4, get as much as you can, possibly. I keep about 1,000 gallons myself, which can, get us a couple months of minimum and a pretty good flow for a month, with sanitation and so forth. So this is the most difficult part, I think, of any preparedness plan is how to store water, how to get more, how to purify it, how to filter it. It definitely takes a lot of planning. And so I think, coming up on we're just coming into spring now. So this is, I think, the perfect time to rotate your water here as soon as it thaws outside. Rotate those water storage that you have, and then think about how you can get more, where you can fit more.
Yeah, I have 350 gallons of store and water tanked water. And then I have another 50, 60 gallons in water bottles that I rotate. So I'm right around 400 total gallons of water at my house right now. And I feel like I need to get more. Like you guys are a little bit further along with the amount of storage you have for that. I have 5 adults right now. Well, 5 people in my house, but my daughter's getting married next month, so I'll have 4 living here. But I'm going to be the guy who stores for them because they're going to come here when it's time. So
of course.
I do feel like I'm on the low end for me, but at 400 gallons, I feel like at least it's a really good start. I feel like so,
and it gives you plenty of time to go and get more as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, most of the time they're not going to have water shut off for a long period of time. They'll have water limitations, so you can only get water at a certain amount per day. And so there'll be flow restrictions. So here's a calculator that we created years ago for this, and you can go get a copy of this at preppertalkradio.com on our resources page. I love this because you can plug in your family situation, right? If you're looking at the screen, you can see the video, but like if you've got 2 adults in your household, and then you've got, let's say you're above average, you got 4 kids, and then you can put in how many days you're trying to prepare for, and this will help you understand how much water and how much food you need to be putting on hand, right? Putting in your home store. So if I'm going to do 14 days, it'll calculate out how many total calories we need, or servings, kind of 2 different views of the breakdown. But then the second section down here, it tells you how much water we're going to need, gallons per day per person, and then total gallons, right? So
Nice.
If I'm looking for 90 days for my little family, I'm going to need over 1,000 gallons for 90 days based off of 2 gallons a day per person. I love this tool. We started using this years ago, and we updated the calorie counts based on minimums and what you need for, understanding your pantry. But like, this also goes into helping you understand, okay, if I'm only storing food that requires lots of water to prep, I'm creating a future hazard for myself. Like anyone that's like, oh yeah, I'm all stocked up on freeze-dried foods, but they have no canned foods, no food that you can just open and eat, things that don't require additional water. Like if you've got to wash beans, and then you've got to soak beans, and then you've got to cook beans, how much water did you just use to make those beans? Same thing with rice. Same thing with all the things you're going to prepare. So you need to take that into consideration. That is huge. And then also, how am I using or how am I consuming that water? That's the next thing you want to look at in your plan.
Yeah, I think a fun thing to do might be is to practice. Maybe just give yourself 2 gallons of water and say, okay, this is all I have to bathe, to cook, to brush my teeth, to drink for the day, and see see what a reality check it is about how much water I feel like my daughter, 10-year-old, she'd use all the gallons of water we have in one shower, for goodness sakes, as long as she takes. But it's a good practice to go and try to see, okay, can I, you'll learn. You can only wash the important parts, and you can only brush the teeth. Maybe you only get to brush your teeth once a day or something, or maybe you don't always get to use water. You have to use your.
Yeah, Mike had
Well, it
some
goes
great
back to
comments here.
understanding. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Mike had some good comments here. Like, to save water, set aside some paper plates and plastic utensils so that you don't have to wash them, because washing, and I practice. Like you said, Paris, I have practiced some of this stuff, and and I just do it every day. It's like, okay, I'm going to see how much water it takes for me to wash these dishes in the sink, and try and measure it out, and then realistically see what that's going to take. And but other great comments here Mike had put out here is that we talked about a little bit about gardening. An important part about gardening is having mulch to keep the moisture in, and grass clippings. Yeah, there are great mulch. And so there's a lot of little things we could talk about how to save water. I don't know if that's where we necessarily want to go today, but there's a lot of things we can do, and that you can practice right now. There's no reason you need to be a water hog all the time. For me, this is good practice that I do all the time.
100%. Well, it's funny too, because like looking at all the different lists and looking at all the different resources that I've created, it's like, okay, what is realistic and what requires practice? Pretty much every water saving technique is going to require practice. You've got to do it to be good at it. Otherwise, you're going to waste a lot of water trying to learn it. But like creating part of your emergency plan resilient to lacking water is your first step of it. Getting the right amount of water for each individual per day for whatever your duration is. Then looking at how am I going to reuse water, like the gray water mentality. Okay, we've used water for this. We're not going to pour it down the drain. We're going to use this water. It's clean enough to water the plants, or it's clean enough, run it through a small filter, and we're going to drink it again. Or if it's in the toilet, you don't want to pull that back out, right? There's certain things you don't want to try to reuse. But the gray water can be great for your garden, for taking care of other things, cleaning outside. Like, you just limit what you're using and how you're using it. And if you don't practice it now, you're going to be really shocked, especially learning how to live with cold water in a scenario where there's also no power.
Mm-hmm. And then that reminds me of the old saying, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because you would fill up the tub once and the whole family uses it, and the baby is the last one. And it's usually so dark and black that if the baby was under, you wouldn't know they were even in there. And so be careful to, put your hand, swish your hand around in there and make sure nobody's, in there anymore. And then you take that water and you put it outside, and you'll either let the cows have at it, or you water the plants. And I think that's a great reminder of what, like Scott, Shane, you look to the past to prepare for the future. What did our ancestors do when they bathed, when they prepared water? They didn't spend a lot of time at that water pump where they brought it up from the well. They did what they needed to do, and they were probably showered once a week. Isn't it like your weekly shower? Wasn't it back in the day?
Monthly, maybe. Well, water weighs 8.3 pounds per gallon, so trying to haul that stuff very far is very difficult. So, like I say, water is one of the hardest parts of any preparedness plan.
Which then goes back to water resources. What is near me, or what can I use to my advantage to help create additional stores and refill my stores as we go, right? We always talk about filters, the importance of having filters and ways to clean your water. But you've also got to have ways to get it to where you need it. Like, one of my favorite things is water catchment. I use the ICB or IBC totes, the big ones. They're 700 gallons in some cases. They're 550 in other cases. But I have those around the house where water comes off the roof and goes into those. That's not water I'm going to drink right off the bat. I'm going to process it. But that's water I can use for just about any other purpose around my property, for gardening,
flushing
for
toilets.
cleaning. What's that?
Flushing toilets.
For flushing toilets, right? But it's all stuff I can use. And so having that, and also identifying what are other ways I can get water locally. Okay, I've got catchment. If it doesn't rain for a while, that's a problem. But I've also got a local spring. Can I get water out of that? And then there's also the local runoff. We live in the mountains, so we get water. Certain times of the year, it's flowing really well. even in a drought.
Mm-hmm.
However,
Yeah,
other times of year, like fall and winter, there's nothing in those creeks.
Mhm.
So planning accordingly.
Yeah, I think part of my comments on that is we've got the U.S. Drought Monitor to kind of watch the drought conditions nationwide and statewide and so forth. And honestly, I don't know that I trust those a whole lot. I've seen a bit of propaganda, honestly, lately coming from our own state as to saying, oh, we're in a drought when last year we had more than a record snow year, and this year we're 126%. And I'm still hearing rumors about drought. And okay, that's fine and dandy, but if to be properly prepared, we need to be watching, monitoring our local sources, know the local springs, like you said, Scott. I've got some springs up a small canyon nearby, and get familiar with it, what it does during the different seasons of the year, what time it's flowing, when it's not. If it's a dry year, is it still flowing, or does it dry up? And get to know those sources so that you can have some confidence. So when you run out of water, if you can't catch rain, if we're not catching rain, that you know where to go and how far you got to go and how long it's going to take and how much weight you got to carry and how you're going to do that. And don't rely on all the news sources, I guess what I'm trying to say.
There's some really cool ways to bring moisture out of the air, because the air has moisture. There's always moisture. And there's some cool techniques that you can use. There's a little, you may look like you're building a science project of some kind to get it, but if you can learn, I personally haven't built one of these or looked into it other than just watching a few videos of people who have, and seeing them take water out of the air, so to speak. And it's pretty amazing. It's pretty cool how that works. That's one thing that I have as a weakness right now. If I was to be honest, because I would probably need to build that, do a little more research and learn how to build one of those types of things, of osmosis or whatever it does. It brings that water out of the atmosphere and catches it in plastic bags and things like that. And I think that's pretty cool, because one of the things that's legitimately going to happen if you're in an area if you're not in an area where there's a river or a spring nearby, that's something that you're going to probably want to have to do. If you have a spring nearby and you're in a city or even a suburb, you're gonna have to maybe fight a little bit with some of the other citizens of the city. Warlords will control the water springs. That's true. You may have to defend your life just to go get to the water, and so that's something. If the wicked people that you don't like take control of the waterways before you get a chance, you're gonna have to come up with some alternative ways.
And I think some of those alternative ways may be relocating. If you look back through history for thousands of years, when famines, when droughts come and famines come, what do the people do? They relocate, they move, and they always have. And that, I think, has to be an option for us as well. That's one of the reasons why we have some property away from the busy Wasatch Frontier as well. Our water resources out there are excellent, and the population is low.
You got a waterway right at the back of your butted up to the back of your property.
Right back to the property, and I got a sump, and we've got culinary water, and just multiple ways of getting water.
A couple hours hiking, you have a lake too.
Yeah, exactly. It's a half an hour drive, but then the river is just a couple miles away, so a lot of different ways. And we obviously know that getting out of the cities is probably going to be the best choice for whether it's a drought or whatever it might be. And so just coming up with those plans now and knowing what you're going to do, I think is the most important thing you can do right now.
Absolutely. I was just thinking 100%. Right now, as you were saying that Joseph in Egypt, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, he talks about how he had that, he interpreted the Pharaoh's dream, and his family moved from wherever, I can't remember where they lived, but they moved into Egypt. They relocated into Egypt. And I just thought about this for a minute. It talks about how they stored grain, but I don't remember anything in the Bible about them storing any water.
Storing water, that's true.
What in the world is it? Like maybe the Nile River was still flowing pretty good. They could just go over there and grab it. The aqueducts were fine, but
no, I was reading that today as well, Paris, and thinking about Joseph in Egypt and that story, and I wondered about. I was thinking about that too. Yeah, talk about grain. They prepared for 7 years, and hopefully we have that much time left. But But yeah, what do they do about the? I mean, it's desert out there anyway. I can't imagine anyone surviving out there as is. Imagine their water use compared to ours. Now we're such water hogs. I mean, compared to a real desert. I mean, Utah's a desert, but nothing like the Sahara Desert right out in North Africa and in the Middle East and everything. I can't imagine living out there, honestly.
So here's a question that popped into the chat. So Sandy asked, are you able to tap into a birch tree? I don't know specifically about birch, but there are different trees you can get sap out of, which you can turn into syrups. But there's also over 1 billion gallons of water tapped from trees per year. So it is a safe way to get water. It's just what trees you'll need to each do your own research and find out what trees will work. But definitely maple trees are one of those sources of getting water. So and this is the thing we talked about earlier, like find out what's available in your area. Does it have the type of tree you can tap? Do some research. Take that responsibility and run with it. I think that's a great question. Thank you, Sandy.
That reminded me as I was thinking about that. I don't know if you guys remember, this is a really old movie. I think it's called The Gods Must Be Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that African like tribal guy who like leads that girl across the desert or something like that. And it's like these Aboriginals, these people, they figured out how to pull water out of plants, out of shrubbery, out of like seemingly nowhere. And so the reality of that to me is that if they can figure out how to get water, I should be able to figure out how to get water. I just need to take the time to do it. I mean, they grew up in this culture. They grew up, their dad, their grandfather. I mean, it was handed down. That knowledge of how to get water out of the ground and the earth and plants was handed down. And all we have to do in our day is learn it. We have to just go figure out who teaches it or where the skill set is, and then learn it, because it's clearly got to be out there. And I think doesn't Tyler Whitejack? I'm probably getting his name wrong, but
TJ Tyler White.
TJ, sorry, doesn't he teach how to do some of that stuff?
A little bit. So Tyler White, TJAC Survival is his YouTube.
Sorry.
He does teach wild living skills, right? Wilderness living skills, where to get water, how to get water in a couple of ways, but also he teaches things about foraging, a little bit of medicinal use of foods that you can forage, but also trapping and just wilderness living skills, like how to make a knife out of rocks and a lot of cool other stuff.
So there's people out there that teach that stuff. We just got to go find them and engage.
Yeah, go to Mountain Man Rendezvous. There's courses on that, different ones. Rabbit Stick, which is the big one. They do a lot of wilderness living skills, train out of that. The biggest thing is if you don't have time to learn those things now, you need to change your schedule.
Yeah.
Find ways to learn, because knowledge is useless unless it's used. And using knowledge creates wisdom. And you want to be as wise as possible when things go sideways, so you know what to do and that you have experience doing it, so that troubleshooting and fixing things along the way won't break down your entire survival plan.
Great point.
Yeah, great comment. Another thing I was thinking of, after the Texas freeze a couple of years ago, we saw those power bills. Some of these people's power bills were $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 for a month because they switched to a more expensive power source for reasons, right? And so I see what we talked about rationing. I think that's going to be a big part of drought. Droughts are coming; they will come. I mean, it's prophesied. It's in the scriptures. It's part of end day prophecy. And I think at first you're going to see higher water bills, just like electric bills. As an attempt to ration water, they'll increase the price so that you'll be more mindful in reducing your water bill, right? So I think practice now makes perfect. To make sure you don't get hit with those big bills at some point. Hopefully we'll have some warning right when that happens. But I think if you can learn to live off less, and that applies not just to water, but to electricity, to everything we do, we can really live off less than we have. We're pretty greedy, power greedy, and everything, and I think we really could live a much simpler lives. And I think as part of minimization, prepping, we've talked about about being more minimalists, and we have plenty, and there is something to be said about that, about having plenty and having that mindset of if you have a scarcity mindset, that can be limiting as well. Just having a prepping or preparer mindset can be limiting as well to some people. I've had people ask me, well, you live this way, but don't you think it hurts your quality of life? Well, in your mind, yeah, it very well might be living a much lower quality of life than you do. But for me, and because I've changed the way I live. And so I don't have to, it doesn't, I don't even think that. I'm got the sink on the lowest, as low as I can while I'm brushing my teeth or I'm washing these pots and trying to get away with as little water use as possible. I think that's perfect practice right now. And it's, again, changing that mindset instead of just living with so much excess we have here. It's just so very wasteful.
Well, it's interesting that we're talking about a drought. And when you think about, our states have declared a drought. When I lived in California, they declared a drought. I think the biggest problem I ever had in California was swapping out my front yard, or the closest I got to really feeling the drought was that. And then also, I think I got a bill one time or a letter in the mail that said, hey, by the way, you're using a little bit more than you did last month. Please be careful. So like a real drought is when you haven't drunk water for a day. You know what I mean? Like we really don't know what a drought really is. When you think about all of these people that live in third world countries who they fight every day to get their water. I mean, I remember I don't know if you guys have watched The Chosen, but one of the scenes there was the woman at the well. And, when you read the New Testament, you're like, oh yeah, Samaria, whatever. It's probably just, a couple, steps away and the well's right there. But when in the video, like it seemed like miles to get that water. It's like these people, like we just turn on a faucet and we're like, woohoo, like whatever. Yeah, we're in a drought.
Don't even think about it. Yeah.
They had to walk miles. Like I think you guys were saying earlier, Scott maybe was saying earlier, how heavy that is. You got to remember that throughout most of history, people had to do a lot just to get the water, the minimal water they could. They had to go to rivers to wash their clothes. They had to go to rivers with buckets over their shoulders to haul it back. I mean, it's just, there's one story I heard of a girl who would go 8 or 10 miles one way just to get 5 or 10 gallons of water. And that was the water that they could use that day. Mm-hmm. And it's like, wow, like we're so blessed in where we live. And to really think about what a drought really means, we really need to get prepared and we need to get ready, because when it hits, it's going to be a lot more devastating than most people think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some other tips. These are kind of the sillier ones. Ways to reduce water usage. We talked about trying to learn how to do your dishes on less water, doing your laundry. If you're going to run your washing machine, run it only at full capacity, right? Toilets, get lower use or restricted water use on those. Make sure you don't have any drips in your plumbing systems. I mean, those are thousands of gallons a year if you've got a dripping faucet, right? You can do things like, a lot of people waste so much water because they're running the hot water until it actually gets hot water at the tap, right? There are ways you can change that on demand, right? I have that problem depending on where I am in the house. Mm-hmm. And I just found these things you can actually, these little water heaters, electric on demand heaters, you can put them in any room in the house or any water room in the house. Like they go into the sink and they tap right into the existing lines.
Instant hot.
So yeah, it's going to spend more money on electricity, but you're not going to be running water forever and wasting gallons and gallons before you actually have hot water. And so thinking about those things, and my big plan when we're in a major drought is the bucket life, right? If I have to haul water, I've got buckets for that. Mm-hmm. I've got bags that are water bags specifically designed for that. I've got a Ram water pump.
A cart to carry your water on?
Here. so it runs the water up the hill for me, so I don't have to go up and down all the time. But then also, like, remember the old Western shows where everyone's washing their hands in a little bowl? They've got a pitcher, they pour the water into the bowl, they wash their hands, and then they rinse off their hands with the pitcher. Like, we'll be at that point soon.
Yeah.
And get a couple pitchers, have them around.
And
Stop making Kool-Aid. You can make Kool-Aid with them now, but then at a certain point, you'll put them in the bathroom, and that's how you're going to wash your hands and take care of things.
I think here's another aspect to think of is your cleaning chemicals. What are you using to clean? Because if you're using something that requires to be rinsed, right, it leaves behind a residue, right, like bleach or something, some harmful chemical. We don't, typically we use a lot of water to rinse those products away, and we've switched over to a vinegar salt electrolytic solution that really doesn't require any rinsing. We spread it around, dry it, and it requires very little water. So I think that's an important aspect as well as your shampoo. Are you using conditioner and need a lot of water to rinse your conditioner out, right? Maybe you have some of that dry shampoo on hand for emergencies, and you don't have to use water. I think consider those types of things when you're preparing to use less water. If your process now always requires a lot of water, it's always going to require a lot of water.
100%.
We have I just thought of this right now. Actually, I don't remember why we didn't think about it earlier, but we actually have a relationship. We had a couple years ago, we were at a Be Preparedness show, and there was a guy there that invented this really cool pump that pumped water out of a river or a lake or a pond, and it filtered it, and then it had a hose that would put it into a 5-gallon pump. I think you bought one, Shane.
Yeah, I bought one.
So there's a link in the description. It's the Portawell, and it's a portable water filter that pumps as well. And it's in the description and the show notes. You'll see a link for that if you want to go pick one of those up. Check it out. It'll support the show. That's a quick commercial while we're talking about water. I didn't even think about it until right now. I was like, wait a minute. I know we had a pump slash filter that was really good that we had an affiliate link for. So we talked to the owner. In fact, I think we interviewed him at that show. So if you want to look way back on our channel, there might be an interview with him. It's the My Portawell pump and water filter. And I think it's a great thing. I actually just reminded me I need to start saving up for one of those, because that's important. You want to have, when you have a stream or a river or a lake or a pond, and you're like, how do I get the water out of it? Number one. Number two, how do you get it clean? Unless you have a pump of some kind. And this answers both of those questions. It both pumps it out, filters it, and then pumps it into a bucket that you can carry, or a container that you can carry. So it kind of answers that question. And it's, for those that can afford it, I think it's the right solution. Otherwise, you're going to have to come up with something else to do the same thing, because you're going to have to be able to go in there and get the water out. And then once it's out, filter it, because you don't want to be drinking directly.
Yeah, and I think, like White had said, he has a hand pump and electric pump. Having multiples and redundant systems, especially if you got to get it out of the ground, 187 feet below. If you don't have a hand pump, or you don't have the ability to fix that pump, and but just have multiple methods to get that water out of the ground, right? And one is none, two is one, 3 is probably what you should have.
3 is getting started.
Yeah, exactly. And Sandy's saying here, how many gallons do you use to flush the toilet? I think it's like 1 or 1.2, right?
Yeah, it's about 1.28 on the lower side, up to 2 gallons on the heavier side.
The saying is, if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. So be wise, right? Be wise.
Nice.
And reuse the reusable water. So put a container underneath your sink. When you wash your hands, use that to dump into the toilet to flush the toilet.
Yep.
Simplify, reuse, reduce. Like, it's funny because all those catchy terms we heard as kids growing up in school and on the radio, those can be used so great now in our lives in preparedness. Who knew?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be important. Years ago, I bought a bunch of towelettes, like little body wipes for my bath. So, we've gotten accustomed to daily showers every day. Most people, every other day most Americans will probably shower. I don't know what the averages are, but it's probably daily or every couple of days. And that's a lot of water. And when
Mhm.
you're in a real serious drought, and I mean by a drought, like it's rationed by the city. Like you turn on the faucet and it's not flowing because there isn't any left. You got to figure out what to do. That might be more realistic of what we're thinking about coming. That's coming. But when you have that situation, you're gonna have to, if you like being clean, get some of those towelettes, get some of those washable, things,
Baby
and
wipes. Yeah.
baby wipes. And even then, that's still, I mean, those disposable things you're gonna have to come up with. But I would say even more reusable, like have, some way to make it. I know for sure, like for example, in the morning time, it's kind of the dew of the night is
Mm-hmm.
is out there. So even if you excuse me, even if you put a washcloth out at night, the dew of the night may give it enough dampness for you to, clean off the important areas for the day. So that's just something I just thought of. I don't know if that's bro science or real. Maybe somebody who's got a little bit more survival
No,
skills.
here's an idea. Here's a thought. There are hand towels, washcloths out there that are available that have silver particles in them, and they are
Antibacterial.
what's the right term? Yeah, they're antibacterial, and you can actually use them without detergent to wipe down countertops and wash your hands and so forth with just some water. And so, I think that would be a smart part of your routine for sanitation as well. And we've talked about using calcium hypochlorite to create a cleaning solution as well. Still, I don't know if I like that so much, but better options. And then here's something I thought about as well. Learn how to. You need to have someone in your prepper group that knows how to douse, that knows how to actually go out and find water with dowsing rods or with whatever method. There's a number of different methods. That's something I think I want to learn, is actually how to find groundwater that way. And treasure, of course. I go find some gold, some buried gold.
Yeah.
Dowsing rods as well.
It's funny because you talk about that. I actually did that with, you remember John Roberts?
Yeah. Did John know how to do it?
He knows how to do it. We did it in Idaho once, up at some property one of his in-laws owned. And I was like, this is hokey. There's no way. And he's like, watch. And he has like 3 different ways to do it in his truck at all times. He's like, it's really fascinating how this works. There's a science to it. And I'm like, it's not a science. It's hokey. And
it works.
He found it every time. He found where the water was. And honestly, I was a little bit aghast at how easy he made it look. And so, he's like, buy this book.
How deep did he have to dig?
And the one that he dug first was about 3 feet deep.
Okay.
We found a few different places, and he's like, this one, it's definitely deeper, so we're not going to dig. This one, okay, we can dig this later, but I want to see if there's anything more shallow. And the first one we opened was the 3 foot deep one. The other one, he took a rod and just rammed it into the ground, and it was about 10 feet long. And by the time he got about 6-7 feet deep and pulled it out, the tip was wet. And he's like, if you pull water out on the tip, that means that you're hitting the water vein. And there's natural paths water takes through the ground, and there's electricity in it. And he's trying to explain all the science to it. And I'm like, wow, like half of it was over my head. I'm like, what does that even mean? But he was right. He found it. And it was brilliant. I was so impressed.
This just goes to show that those skills are still available. It's not, sometimes we look back on those guys are like, yeah, were they shamans or some wackadoo, they get into the woo woo, Cliff High talks about the woo woo, but it's like, wow, there's just, to me, honestly, it's like hidden knowledge. It's this ancient wisdom that the ancients used that's been lost as we now try to rely more on some of the things that we're doing today. And I mean, shoot, you gotta be kidding me. Like, how did these guys get so accurate with building the pyramids? And we can't even figure out how to do, so I'm not getting into the pyramids in this conversation, but I'm just saying that there's some ancient technology that's pretty legit that we probably ought to take a second look at, or at least figure out. Cause that's amazing, Scott, that if I could learn how to get water, if you can even learn that skill halfway decent, that's a perfect way to get drought. Where does the water go? If God, let's say that it is one of those things that we need to repent, Shane, and God's like, nope, no water coming from the sky. Well, that the earth still got to keep going, and the plants and stuff keep going. They dig deeper into the roots and into the ground. And we should probably remember that, because there's water somewhere, and the wise and the prudent and the preparers will know where to go find it, and God will give them the directions and give them the instructions to go do it, I think.
And you go to Genesis, and it does say, and he separated the waters above and the waters below.
Yeah.
Right. So there's ways to find it down there.
There are waters in streams, rivers, and lakes underground. Yeah. Lakes are called aquifers. Right there, it's all over the world, and we just need to find them and use them.
Just need to strike a rock, and like in the days of Moses,
go strike the rock and have a 5-story rock building crack in half and flood the whole valley.
Really, all about being righteous and knowing how to pray. I mean, that's really what this is. So we don't even worry about all this other stuff, right? Just get spiritually prepared.
I mean, there's plenty of stories in the scriptures where the people weren't doing what they're supposed to, but a couple of guys were like, hey, you know what? I'm going to follow God, and I'm going to do what I'm supposed to. And God's like, hey, I'm not going to tell them, but I'll tell you, if you go here or go there, you'll be able to figure out what you need. And the rest of the people are like, what's going on? And you're over here like, I'm keeping to myself. So there's some legit stories. I believe that's one of the things I'm preparing in my life, is that the faith to be able to find the things that are there and necessary for my family to survive as God gives me protection.
Amen.
So that's legit, dude.
I think that leads to the quote, faith without works is dead, being alone. Mm-hmm. God will give us direction if we're willing to do the work that he's going to ask us to do. Noah had to build the ship. Noah had to store his food. And God told him everything he needed to do to get it all done and get it ready, right? Moses had to hit the rock with the staff to get the water out, right? The faith is an action. Faith is an action word. And the fruit only comes out of that faith when we do what the Lord's telling us to do.
Amen. Any final thoughts?
Well, in hindsight, I think the only other thing I can think of in my preparedness for water, drought, I guess diversification or preparedness, is learn about other ways that I can reduce my water consumption on the daily and get my kids to practice it. Because like Parrish, you said, your daughter uses a lot of water when she cleans. That's the big problem, right? Mm-hmm. That's the hard problem. So I think I've got a lot of stuff for myself personally from this episode to continue to study and learn. And that's, I think, part of the journey that a lot of people forget is it's never ending. It's always improving, and it's always growing, and always being willing to look at what you're doing and see, is it enough, or am I doing it wrong? Can I do better?
Yeah.
And so that's my final word of just reminder, like, is it enough? Can I do more, or can I do it better? Always add that to your self-check.
And one of the things I like about this particular episode particularly is that, when we came up with the ideas of preparing for specific things, I was like, you know what, it's pretty much the same thing for everything. And as we dug into the conversation today, I realized that my generic attitude is going to probably get me killed in a drought. After the discussion today, there's some things I need to figure out, like the dowling rod. Like, goodness sakes, that you don't need a dowling rod in a tornado or a hurricane necessarily, but you need it when there's a drought. So those are there are some specific skills to each natural disaster or potential natural disaster that should be on our list of things to learn as soon as possible. And I know I've added a few things to my list today as I've done this show. So that was good. You're right.
Yeah, I'm going to go order some dowsing rods after we get done here.
Right. Figure out, and let me know if when you find a good one. Let's put it out on the
John
email.
Teach us how to do it.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
You got to track them down. So that's going to be a future episode, learning how to track down someone who doesn't want to be found.
Yeah, subscribe to our channel so that when Shane does the how-to video, we'll all be able to watch it.
Go out in the field. Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it.
Awesome. Well, any final thoughts, guys?
I'm good.
Just as we wrap up, thanks so much for listening to Prepper Talk Radio, radio for the ready-minded. A couple things, housekeeping real quick. Wherever you are, wherever you're listening, We hope that we deserve a 5-star rating, but we'd love to have you rate our show on whatever podcast your platform you're using, whether it's Spotify or Apple, iTunes, or whatever it is. Just put, I was looking on some of the platforms, the last review was years ago, and I'm like, man, I would hope that more people would have some comments and reviews for us that more recent. So if you're listening and we're wrapping it up here, before you sign off, just go hit the 5-star, and then throw a little couple comments in there for us and about how you like the show or what you'd like to see us do. And if you really want to make sure to get a hold of us, go to our group at Emergency Prep and Self-Reliance on Facebook and join the group, and then enter there. We have a lot of chat conversations. We read those chat conversations quite often, and we reply to those at least every other day, if not daily. So we really appreciate you guys listening, appreciate you being part of our program. And if you want to get some good gear and some good deals on some gear, go visit our friends at survivalfrog.com. Use the code PrepperTalk to get 10% off. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, everybody.